Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Chen Ming had a general understanding of the situation of the mechanical race before. However, he did not have many ways to download these research reports on the mechanical race at will, and these things all cost money. At that time, compared to spending money to buy these reports, Chen Ming might as well spend the money on himself and his spaceship. Until now, he can browse these things that he can use now without restrictions. Soon, Chen Ming basically determined the role of the city that Chu Guang had discovered. It can only be said that he was a little bit nervous when he analyzed the results through the image. According to the contents of several research reports, the city discovered by Chu Guang was a stronghold used by the civilization that created the mechanical race to occupy this barren star field, which is equivalent to an outpost on the border. No, it's not even an outpost. They just put a flag here to indicate that they have been here. The current location of the empire is a place that people did not look down on in their heyday, so there are so many mechanical races left here. As for the mechanical races that are fighting with Yu Hui and the empire, they are the mechanical races left after the destruction of that civilization, which have developed and spread again. All the research reports on the mechanical races in Chen Ming's hand cannot avoid the destroyed civilization. So Chen Ming now has a basic understanding of the situation of the mechanical race in another destroyed civilization. Almost everything that should be known is known. Even if you don't want to waste too much energy to learn, at least you have some basic understanding. However, the Empire is not doing in-depth research on that civilization at present. It's not that they don't study it, but the productivity of this civilization before its destruction can be said to have reached its peak. Their heyday is a level that humans today can't even touch. I want to study it, and after studying it for a long time, I found that the results of the research are just a little bit of fur. So now, even if Chen Ming knows that this city is just a flag used for marking, he must go and see it. There is a certain possibility that there are relics of another civilization on it. After confirming these situations, Chen Ming commanded 3 cruisers to set off. The jump begins. In a blink of an eye, Chen Ming arrived at the predetermined location, the edge of the galaxy where the planet of the mechanical race existed. For safety reasons, Chen Ming did not continue to drive the 3 cruisers in. Instead, he stopped directly on the spot and asked the Supreme Point to shut down all unnecessary and redundant devices. Almost all the energy of the entire ship was used to fully supply the galaxy scanning array, composed of a large galaxy-level scanning core and a long-range high-precision sensor located in the front of the Supreme Point. By adjusting a specific detection frequency, the scanned object can be locked on metal and mechanical creations, especially for materials such as Bayun steel that are particularly common in the mechanical race. As long as they can be locked, the results returned by the detection will definitely be clearer. After the high-power scan lasted for about 10 minutes, the galaxy scanning array was shut down. The results of the scan appeared in Chen Ming's hands. There were many detailed data in the scan result report that Chen Ming could not understand, but these were not important. He was currently learning from a guide left by the designer of the Supreme Point. So far, he has learned a part of it. At least he can understand the results of the targeted scan he just conducted. There is no problem inside the entire galaxy. It is basically the same as the rough investigation by Chu Guang before. The mechanical race exists only on the planet where the mechanical race was discovered before. They are only on that planet, and there is no sign of expansion. Although there are minerals and metals on other planets, there are only these things, nothing of particular value. As for the planet where the mechanical race exists, it can be seen from the actual scan results of the highest point just now. The mechanical race on it is not distributed throughout the planet, but all concentrated in a mechanical race city located about 30 degrees north of the equator. Because this habitable planet itself has no deflection angle, and the location of its habitable zone is closer to the star that is larger than the Sun relative to the Earth. Therefore, the climate of the entire planet will be relatively hot, and basically there will be no changes. The environment of the mechanical race city should be somewhat similar to the tropical rainforest. The last time Chu Guang came here, he saw a jungle with dense green vegetation. There is also a mechanical city that is almost trapped in the jungle. Combined with what the highest point has just scanned, this city is exposed to the natural environment, and there are very few active mechanical people in the area that can be scanned by the scanner. Chen Ming feels that the mechanical people here may be dormant, and their development seems to have stagnated. They may not have moved for hundreds or thousands of years. However, the highest point is a large-scale scan from a long distance, so the result may not be very accurate. We still have to go closer to confirm it. But at least one thing is certain, that is, Chen Ming did not detect any signal of large-scale activities on the planet. This should explain a lot of things. Chen Ming slightly adjusted the positions of the 3 spacecraft. Let the brilliant class with the strongest firepower and mobility be in front, and the supreme point and defender in the back, and gradually approach the planet of the mechanical race in a triangle. Although the supreme point did not scan the existence of mechanical warships in space just now, the necessary precautions must not be missed. As the spacecraft gradually approached, Chen Ming's mind was still repeating the content of the research on the mechanical race that he had just seen. According to the research and investigation of some research institutes within the Empire, there is a big difference between the individuals of the mechanical race and the afterglow that looks similar at first glance. The most obvious point is that the afterglow is a separate individual like humans, while the mechanical race is more like a hive mind. All mechanical bodies are sub-individuals, with only basic consciousness, and they are more like a part of the collective. Of course, the few mechanical races that Chen Ming had contacted were obviously independent and had a high probability of being disconnected from the collective. The city of the mechanical race that it was going to contact now was most likely an independent group of mechanical races. However, for all mechanical races, their hatred for humans was almost engraved in their logic and could not be changed. So Chen Ming did not expect to have direct contact with them. If contact really occurred, it must be in battle. The 3 cruisers quickly approached a relatively safe distance, and then stopped directly, without directly entering the planet's orbit. The main reason was that Chen Ming was worried that there might be mechanical race warning or defense satellites in the orbit. So it was better to let the highest point scan first. Such a distance was enough to ensure a safe distance for the highest point to conduct a high-power scan. After the ship stopped, Chen Ming directly started the galaxy scanning array of the highest point again. Not long after, a steel city surrounded by jungle and integrated with the jungle appeared in front of him. The last time Chu Guang came close to the planet, he only saw some mechanical tribes outside. He simply recorded the characteristics of the city and evacuated directly without much investigation. This time Chen Ming came in person and saw the city clearly. At the same time, he also completely understood what the demise of civilization meant. Only when he actually saw this rusty city that could collapse at any time, the wild vegetation that broke the tops of countless buildings, and the mechanical tribes that were paralyzed everywhere, Chen Ming knew the meaning of the 4 words civilization demise. Chen Ming didn't look at the city scene for a long time, because he had to go down later. Chen Ming now had to pay more attention to the things in the orbit around the star. The scanning array just scanned the existence of a satellite in orbit, but it was confirmed that the satellite had stopped working and was already in ruins. At the same time, there were no weapons or warning equipment around. So Chen Ming directly asked the defender to go over and easily recovered the satellite and put it in the warehouse. The appearance of the satellite appeared clearly in front of Chen Ming through the internal monitoring of the defender. The outer shell made of white cloud steel material has not changed much in space, but the internal circuit has been completely aged and can no longer operate. The time the satellite has existed in space is too long to be determined, but it must have been a long time. And because of the aging of the circuit, the signal receiving and sending functions have been completely damaged, and the records stored inside can no longer be viewed. Even if Chen Ming has the ability to repair, he can only repair the signal receiving and sending functions at most, and the internal storage records cannot be restored. This satellite now seems to be a scrap metal that can only be recycled. Or, Chen Ming can also study the manufacturing process of the communication equipment inside. There is no need to learn technology. Chen Ming knows that the Empire's superluminal communication technology is learned from the heritage of these civilizations. It's just that the satellite is so broken that he doesn't expect to research anything. In short, Chen Ming can now confirm that there is no defense set up on the outer layer of this planet. Just go down directly. Of course, Chen Ming did not go down himself, nor did he let the cruiser go down. It was too dangerous for him to go down himself. The cruiser would consume too much energy to enter the atmosphere, and it would be too conspicuous. So Chen Ming directly used the landing craft on the Defender to launch a small robot equipped with a gamma core into the planet's atmosphere. The fire generated by the landing craft when it rubbed against the atmosphere might attract the mechanical race, so Chen Ming deliberately let the landing craft land at a relatively far distance. And in this process, the highest point in the orbit continued to maintain a detailed observation of the city. However, Chen Ming's deliberate precautions seemed meaningless. As long as the mechanical race is not blind, they will definitely see the fire falling from space, but they don't care at all, and they didn't come to investigate. The sporadic mechanical race that the scanning array can see is still active. None of them cares about Chen Ming's landing craft. This scene made Chen Ming, who originally intended to prevent the mechanical race from attacking, spend some time to get the landing craft close to the mechanical race's city again and put down the small robot. The small robot moved swiftly and lurked close to the city with vegetation, arrived at the edge of the city, and stayed at a certain distance from the security devices on the edge of the city. Before entering the city completely, Chen Ming once again clearly felt that this was a dead place. There was no sound except the occasional sound of mechanical parts. This is a habitable planet, and a habitable planet in the tropical zone. The vegetation is dense and the species of organisms are rich, but it is extremely quiet around the mechanical city. Even the sound of insects can't be heard. At most, the sound of wind blowing through the vegetation and the friction of leaves can be heard. The same situation is probably true inside the city. This scene made Chen Ming, who had just left the relatively popular pirate space station not long ago, feel physically uncomfortable. Fortunately, he didn't need to go in person. After observing for a while, the small robot easily passed through the paralyzed security devices on the edge of the city. And through the scanning equipment installed by Chen Ming on it, the location of most of the basic security monitoring inside the city was confirmed. At this point, Chen Ming also understood why the Empire had so much technological growth during the pioneering period. Obviously, it was learned from the ruins of another civilization. These surveillances, similar to the surveillance that Chen Ming often sees, are evidence. The small robot confirmed the many damaged surveillance blind spots and successfully entered the city. And after entering the city, Chen Ming became more and more certain that this was a dead place. Not only almost all the mechanical races visible to the naked eye have lost their performance as mechanical life forms and are rigidly dormant in place. And at the level of data networks, only a small amount of electronic signals are propagating throughout the city. The density of electronic signals here may not even be comparable to the mining space station where Chen Ming once worked. Of course, Chen Ming is referring to the mining space station that is still in operation. A space station with a diameter of only 2 or 3 kilometers is completely incomparable to this city in terms of scale. But in terms of signal density, it has surpassed the city, and the situation in the city is undoubtedly very bad. At this time, Chen Ming's robot scanned a signal with the most frequent fluctuations. It was emitted from a device that continuously sent information to satellites in space at the top of a high tower in the center of the city. It's just that the satellite corresponding to the city in orbit has been damaged, and now it is on Chen Ming's Defender, and the continuous sending of signals will not have any response. Chen Ming tried to capture the content of the signal, but unfortunately, Chen Ming had no way to decipher these contents, so he could only record the information itself, then let the robot continue to move. This scene of decay in the city, no, it should be said that it has already decayed and there is nothing good to see. Still have to let the robot follow the hidden corners between the countless collapsed buildings and prepare to go to the core of the city. That tall tower. In addition to continuously sending signals to the satellite, the tower itself seems to be an energy tower. Relying on microwave power, it provides electricity for the entire city to operate. Either this tower is the core of the city, or the buildings around the tower are the core of the city. In short, Chen Ming must go there. In the process of approaching the center of the city, Chen Ming finally saw a mechanical family that was not dormant but still active. Like the maintenance mechanical family that Chen Ming had seen before, it has several mechanical arms, and it is a mechanical family that performs auxiliary work at a glance. It is constantly cleaning the vegetation covering various buildings and even walking roads. But it is obvious that it is the only mechanical family cleaning, and its efficiency is almost zero compared to the entire city. But this mechanical family seems to be unaware and continues to work in vain. Chen Ming took a few glances and continued to let the robot move forward. Before he could confirm whether the mechanical race here was as aggressive as those he had seen before, he still could not take the initiative to contact the mechanical race. On the way to the city center, Chen Ming also found many fallen mechanical races in the gaps between many buildings covered with vegetation. At first glance, it looked just like the fallen mechanical races that could be seen everywhere on the road outside. However, Chen Ming took a closer look and found that this fallen mechanical family was different from the other mechanical families. There was no sign of electrical signal activity on the mechanical family that fell in the gap between the collapsed buildings. It was completely different from the mechanical family next to it that was still working and barely maintaining the operation of the city. It was even different from the dormant mechanical families outside the city. It was not dormant, but dead. It lost the consciousness of the sub-individual and its own existence. So, Chen Ming controlled the small robot to remove the gamma core installed inside. It connected the internal circuit of this mechanical family, which was the same model as the combat mechanical family that Chen Ming had seen before. Its body was slender, and the whole body was similar to a mantis, but it had a roughly human shape. The left arm was a mechanical arm that imitated the structure of a human arm, and their right arm was replaced by an electromagnetic javelin that Chen Ming was familiar with. At the beginning, Chen Ming directly used the iron ore and relied on the weight of the spacecraft to forcibly crush and kill those mechanical families. But now he no longer needs to use this method. Soon, the gamma core successfully connected to the inside of the mechanical family and successfully controlled its corpse. And its name also appeared in front of Chen Ming. Standard mechanical body of the mechanical family, quiet mantis, damaged. On the more detailed panel that was pulled down, Chen Ming could also see more detailed data, such as the status of different parts of the mechanical family. For example, the status of its mechanical arms and weapons were displayed in detail on the panel. However, these were not important. Only a few special lines of content made him pay more attention. One of the lines was individual consciousness, death. Another line was available operations, repair, renovation/disassembly at the bottom of the panel. And the line that Chen Ming cared about most was the content of the three components on the mechanical family, which was similar to the important equipment column on the spacecraft panel. Standard core chip, damaged. Standard secondary core, damaged. Nano-level maintenance mechanical body, 3%. Like all the damaged mechanical equipment Chen Ming had ever come into contact with, these can all be repaired as long as there are materials. But would repairing a mechanical body lead to the resurrection of its dead individuals? And would it lead to the resurrection of the surrounding mechanical races who had not yet noticed the small robots lurking in and suddenly surrounded them? As soon as this question came to Chen Ming's mind, he immediately denied it. Let's not talk about whether it is reliable to resurrect a mechanical life just by repairing its parts. Let's just say that his psychic power can make the mechanical body controlled by him under his control for the rest of his life, and it can be repaired directly. Chen Ming activated his psychic power, and with the slight consumption of mental power and the small reduction of materials, the entire Jing mantis was successfully repaired. But Chen Ming's psychic power only repaired its worn armor on the outside, the aging circuits on the inside, as well as the chip and secondary core. Its nano-level maintenance mechanical body, 3%, column did not change. It is just like fuel. Chen Ming must find a way to make it himself before he can replenish it. But the manufacturing of fuel and the manufacturing of nanoscale robots are not in the same dimension. So Chen Ming chose to ignore it for the time being. He looked at the line of consciousness on Jing Mantis's panel. It was the same as what he thought. The consciousness of the mechanical race was still in death and had not been restored by the repair of the chip and the secondary core. Chen Ming knew that the consciousness of Yu Hui's individual was a piece of data in the core, but he didn't know what kind of existence the consciousness of the mechanical race was. He had no way to revive a mechanical life. Chen Ming shook his head slightly, relying on his control over Jing Mantis, trying to read the contents of its chip. But the result was a failure. Although Chen Ming successfully extracted the internal data, he could not understand the contents at all. Just like his previous attempt to read other mechanical race chips, and just like the situation that the entire empire has not yet been able to decipher the language and data of the mechanical race. As a relic of another civilization, the mechanical race is indeed very special. Chen Ming thought about it and asked Chao Fan, who was already installed at the highest point, "How is your research on the mechanical race going?" "I am not responsible for the research of the mechanical race. I am generally responsible for the design and manufacture of ships. You brought me out of the giant dock before, so you should know it, right?" "It is clear, but I just want to ask. I can only ask you about research now." "Well, I don't know much. I only know that it is very difficult for us to conduct in-depth research on the mechanical race. The mechanical race has extreme hatred for us, just like they do for you. We cannot communicate, so we can only conduct research through captives, but there has been no breakthrough so far. We can only distribute the extra chips to extract the computing data flow inside the chips and increase our improvement speed." Chen Ming nodded, indicating that he understood. "It's a pity that I didn't get any valuable information. And there's nothing valuable on this mechanical body. At most, the design of the Jing Mantis's mechanical body can be recorded. Next time Chen Ming lacks a combat mechanical body, he can just use this template." In fact, Chen Ming had recorded a video when he disassembled the mechanical families he killed. But Chen Ming had not experienced half a year of learning at that time. The rough disassembly technology made Chen Ming shake his head when he saw it now. He could only watch the video. It's only now that he got the real Jing Mantis that Chen Ming has the meaning to learn and replicate it. Of course, it's not possible now. At the scene, Chen Ming still let the body of the mechanical family that he had controlled stay in place to prevent being discovered. At the same time, he asked the small robot to take back the gamma core and continue to go deeper. After about an hour, the robot passed through the city that was becoming more and more decayed as it went deeper. Finally arrived in front of the tall tower in the center of the city. The tower itself doesn't look special. It's just a large power supply facility that can cover the entire city. But its lower floors seem to have other uses. After looking around the tower for a while, Chen Ming found a collapsed wall. There were no mechanical individuals moving inside or outside the wall, and there was no monitoring in operation. The robot was able to enter the tower. As soon as he entered the tower, Chen Ming noticed that there was a large area for movement in the bottom floors of the tower. And as he observed, he also understood the functions of the bottom of the tower and the underground floors. This is the control center of this city. Someone. No, there are creatures that have worked here. These creatures belong to the destroyed civilization, and their species are very likely to be similar to humans. So there are these designs in the tower that allowed Chen Ming to easily understand the general purpose. It's a pity that this place is as dilapidated as the city outside. Chen Ming asked the robot to continue trying to find out if there were any actual control panels or exposed data cables on the nearby floors, or to try to find the database of this city. Since many mechanical races in the city were just dormant, not dead, and the same was true in the tower. So Chen Ming had better not do anything destructive now. In the process of searching, Chen Ming did not find the things he had just thought of, but found an archive. All the files placed inside were paper files. Now Chen Ming can be sure that there are indeed traces of the main species of that civilization in this city, not that they just put a flag here and never care about it again. This means that the probability of him finding good things here has been greatly improved. But there is a problem. As time goes by, these paper files can only barely maintain their paper appearance, and the slightest movement will cause these files to be completely destroyed. Even if Chen Ming wants to scan the contents of the files directly, it is impossible, because the text on these files has long been worn out and cannot be recognized at all. There is nothing left in the archive. Fortunately, Chen Ming found a monitoring device in the corner of the archive room that was still in operation and had some of its line's protective layers damaged. Chen Ming immediately blocked his vision and directly connected the data line of the gamma core to the exposed data line connected to the monitoring device. The monitoring of the archive room is connected to an independent monitoring room. This independent monitoring room is quite special. Its function is to monitor some important equipment, such as the archive room here. Although many images on the monitoring are completely dark, but Chen Ming can still confirm the location of some important equipment through monitoring. For example, the bundled cables under the tower that provide energy for the tower and the city. Chen Ming can see many thick cable lines extending from outside the city to inside the city. At the starting point where the line extends, there is a solar panel array with many mechanical protections. This is the place that I didn't see last time I came here. It was also after Chen Ming came here this time. The moment when the highest point scanned this place, Chen Ming knew what they were useful for. The energy lines outside extend from underground to the top of the tower. At the same time, there are countless lines branching at the bottom of the tower, connecting the entire city. Now, only the power supply equipment of the entire tower is still intact and barely running. But if there is no subsequent maintenance, these devices that are still in operation will most likely be almost all broken within a few decades. Of course, this has nothing to do with Chen Ming. He just came to see if there is anything good in the tower. With the location of the archive room and the monitoring room, and Chen Ming's ability to directly repair all the monitoring connected to this special monitoring room, Chen Ming quickly determined the distribution of important locations in the entire tower, and the location of the main control room naturally appeared in his eyes. The robot quickly found the way to the past, found the main control panel that had been completely damaged. After a simple modification to connect the gamma core, Chen Ming once again used the repair psychic power to restore the main control panel to its original state. The entire tower was controlled by him at this moment. Then Chen Ming discovered that in addition to the basic control lines, the entire tower also had a lot of damage to the internal power grid. This caused a lack of power in the tower and the entire city. If it weren't for the shutdown of many facilities and the hibernation of many mechanical races, the entire city would have been paralyzed long ago. And this situation seems to be caused by some power supply equipment, and there is a problem with the solar panels outside. This is quite normal. A large installation area outside the city has been in a state of trouble for so many years, so it is not possible that the situation inside the city is better. Anyway, this does not affect Chen Ming's use of the main control room. Chen Ming's psychic power actually has a powerful effect besides maintenance, which ignores Chen Ming's own skills. In fact, there is another special effect, that is, no matter whether he has ever understood the mechanical equipment he controls, as long as he controls it, he can rely on psychic power to master the method of using it. Of course, it is just the method of use. Chen Ming still has to spend time to study these equipment himself. For example, a cruiser, Chen Ming has never driven it and has no chance to touch it. But after controlling the highest point, he can drive the highest point, and he can use all kinds of complex exploration equipment on it at will. Although there are restrictions, it is outrageous enough. So it is the same now. Chen Ming quickly understood the various functions of the main control room and found the most critical one. This tower has the highest control authority over the mechanical families inside the city. Chen Ming tried it immediately. Try to give a command to a mechanical family in the tower that is dormant near the main control to stop dormancy and move. But it failed. Chen Ming frowned slightly and tried again. But the result was the same. The process of issuing the command was normal. The process of receiving the command was also normal. Even the feedback was normal. But the abnormal thing was that the mechanical family that received the command did not execute the order issued by Chen Ming. It was still dormant in the same place. Chen Ming immediately found another mechanical family dormant in the tower through the monitoring inside the tower. Its appearance was damaged and could be connected. Chen Ming arranged the robot with the gamma core to go there. At the same time, he tried to give it a command. The situation was the same. The process was normal, but the final result was that this mechanical family completely ignored Chen Ming's order. So Chen Ming asked the robot to connect the gamma core, control it, and open the panel at the first time. You can see that the name of this mechanical family is Mechanical Family Small Mechanical Body Worker B. The column of consciousness is subindividual, dormant, not existence or dormant like Yuhui. Just when Chen Ming was trying to figure out why it accepted the order but did not execute it, He suddenly found that the column of consciousness on the panel had changed. From the original individual consciousness, subindividual, dormant, to individual consciousness, subindividual, abnormal. This unexpected situation made Chen Ming completely unexpected. He knew that the subindividual meant an individual in the entire collective under the hive thinking of the entire mechanical race. He also knew that the reason for this situation was probably because his psychic power controlled this mechanical race. But he didn't know what the abnormal behind the subindividual specifically represented. Wait, Chen Ming seemed to understand suddenly. He found that the mechanical race he controlled suddenly seemed to be disconnected from a certain network, causing its computing power to suddenly drop a lot. This mechanical race lost its cluster and lost the assistance of the mechanical race cluster in the city. However, it seemed to have gained some ability to think for itself. This is the meaning of abnormal subindividuals. Apart from that, it seems that there is nothing special. Forget it for now. Chen Ming temporarily put the matter of the abnormal subindividual aside. First, find a way to figure out what happened just now. Chen Ming once again used the tower to try to send a command to the mechanical family that had become an abnormal subindividual. This time, Chen Ming was observing its behavior throughout the process. Receive the command. Confirm the command. Feedback the command. Execute. There was a problem in the step of executing the command. Just like Chen Ming couldn't understand the core of Yuhui, he couldn't understand the process of the mechanical family's chip when it was calculating. But he could see that in the mechanical family's chip, the three things of receiving confirmation and feedback were constructed into a loop. And the point of executing the command was excluded. Chen Ming could understand the meaning of this special logical loop that had been completely locked. Because this basic logic could not be changed if it was locked, the only outcome of the change was death. This completely cut off the possibility of it executing any external commands from the root. It can only rely on the internal hive mind network to receive commands from the main body, just like it is now receiving commands from Chen Ming using psychic energy. Normal methods can no longer affect this or all mechanical races. After completely eliminating the possibility of receiving commands, they are already independent mechanical life, not manufactured mechanical creatures. If Chen Ming could understand the way the mechanical race thinks a little and express these logics in a way that normal humans can understand, rather than in a psychic way, then he could publicize the situation of the mechanical race being locked in logic, and at least he could write several papers, and he would definitely have no problem winning some awards. Although it cannot compare to the antimatter reactor, which can be said to be a groundbreaking product, it must be a very important node on the road to the empire's continued development. Unfortunately, Chen Ming couldn't do it. He could only rely on psychic powers to understand this matter himself. Chen Ming shook his head slightly. Continue what he came here to do at the beginning, looking for valuable things. Relying on the authority of the main control room, Chen Ming quickly explored the entire tower thoroughly. He actually found a database that was still running and not damaged. Chen Ming saved all the files in it as soon as possible. Although he couldn't understand the text on the file, but he could still understand the blueprint on it. These databases contain the blueprints of the early planning of the entire city construction, as well as some design blueprints of the mechanical race. There are also several chips and several spherical objects design blueprints included. Chen Ming immediately thought of the two special things on the mechanical family he just controlled: core chip and secondary core. These blueprints, with quite a lot of pages and extremely complex, should be used to make these two things. Although Chen Ming does not think that it is enough to prepare the materials and make the shell to make the mechanical family. But some things must be tried. After trying, he knew what he would lack. These are the only valuable things in the entire tower. Chen Ming searched for the others several times, but did not find anything special. They were basically damaged things, and there was no point in repairing them. The only meaning was to dismantle them and get materials. But Chen Ming felt that there was no need. Being able to obtain these blueprints and retreat safely is the best outcome of this trip. Chen Ming plans to stop here and leave directly. Anyway, the city of the mechanical family is here. As long as he is not left too far, he can come back whenever he wants. Chen Ming's robot quickly took the worker bee he had just controlled out of the tower. This way out was much easier than when they came in. Although Chen Ming could not control the mechanical race, the tower's control over various facilities inside the city continued. Chen Ming could choose those areas that were still under the control of the tower and swagger out of the city. With two mechanical races, Chen Ming's robot successfully came to the edge of the city where it had entered before. Intend to return to the landing craft from the original road. Just as Chen Ming's robot just stepped out of the city's territory, the ground suddenly began to shake. Earthquake? Chen Ming's subconscious question immediately made him feel something was wrong. Because according to the investigation of the planet, just now conducted by the highest point, it can be determined that the intersection of the continental plates of this planet is not here. And no matter how stupid the people of another civilization are, it is impossible to choose a place where the plates meet on such a large planet to build a city. This sudden earthquake is definitely not a natural phenomenon, but something is moving underground. Chen Ming immediately asked the highest point on the track to adjust the detection frequency. The frequency was locked to the underground. Although the influence of the atmosphere caused the highest point to be unable to detect too deeply when it was outside the atmosphere. But now it was enough. The highest point almost instantly discovered a large area of biological reactions underground not far from Chen Ming's robot. These things were digging quickly underground, close to the city of the mechanical race. Seeing the familiar appearance in the results transmitted back by the scanning array, Chen Ming finally couldn't help but say, "Thorn Zerg? No, we can't just draw a conclusion like this." Chen Ming suppressed his subconscious thoughts, kept calm thinking, and let his robot take the two mechanical races back to the city. Not long after, the bugs that caused the ground to shake broke out of the ground at the edge of the city. The tentacles extending from their ugly, sharp heads covered with spikes were sniffing frantically. Almost instantly locked Chen Ming's robot that had entered the city. Chen Ming had a feeling at this moment that these bugs seemed to be coming for him. The bugs waved their limbs and rushed through the gap in the defense facilities and rushed into the city. At this moment, they seemed to have triggered some defense mechanism. In all places within the sight of Chen Ming's tower, all dormant mechanical races were restarted at this moment. They each performed their duties and returned to their posts. At the same time, most of the mechanical races with combat capabilities were moving towards here. Before Chen Ming could react, a massive battle broke out between the Thorn Zerg and the mechanoids. Chen Ming's robot, which seemed to have caused all this, became an outsider for a while. Chen Ming took advantage of the chaos to let his robot find a safe place to make up for the blind spot of the monitoring area that Chen Ming's tower had lost control of, and sent back the picture of the battlefield. After leaving the battlefield, Chen Ming immediately noticed that under the huge, deep pit dug by these bugs, many bugs that looked very familiar to him were still crawling out. Those cyst bugs had huge vesicles storing acid in their necks, and the muscles on their necks were also extremely developed. Chen Ming had a very deep impression of this kind of bug, because at that time in the space station, although the Zerg were numerous, they basically only had some melee individuals, that is, broadstrider bugs. Chen Ming believed that these bugs were most likely the basic individuals of the Thorn Zerg, so now, even if he saw them, he could not completely confirm that these bugs were the same batch as those in the space station. Just think of it as another batch of Thorn Zerg in the universe. But these cystic worms are different. Chen Ming remembers very clearly that these cystic worms are a type of worms that evolved in just 2 days after he used the range of the spacecraft's weapons to attack those worms from a distance. Even if it is said that Thorn Zergs in other places have evolved the ability to attack from a distance, but this evolution is not exactly the same, right? Chen Ming can be 100% sure that these worms that appear here must be those on the space station. What the hell is the Thorn Zerg? What is going on? 2 questions that suddenly appeared in Chen Ming's mind surrounded him, making him completely unable to understand. Just as Chen Ming couldn't think of an answer at all, the battle between the Thorn Zerg and the mechanical clan continued. In addition to the largest number of broadstrider worms in the Thorn Zerg, there are also some smaller beetle-like Zergs. And the larger Zergs, more than 3 meters tall and with quite a lot of limbs, also emerged from the holes they dug and joined the battlefield, rushing towards the mechanical race like crazy. Although the Zergs charging in the front were all rushing forward like brainless people, The cystic worms behind were completely different. They were very smart and wandered around the edge of the battlefield, scattered, but they were able to focus the sprayed acid on a certain target in a very consistent manner. These acids, which were different in color from those Chen Ming had seen before, could even melt Bayun steel. These thorn zergs seemed to have the same hive mindset as the mechanical race. Although the zergs were numerous and their actions were extremely crazy, but the number of mechanical races in the city was also very large, and they didn't care about the madness of the zergs at all. They were just cold machines, slaughtering the thorn zergs that invaded their city. In addition to the long-range combat individuals such as the Jing mantis that Chen Ming had seen, which carried electromagnetic javelins, the mechanical race also had close combat units like the zerg. In particular, there is a kind of mantis that is similar to the silent mantis controlled by Chen Ming. It also looks like a combination of a human and a mantis, but it looks more like a mantis mechanical body. From each of its arms, a light blue translucent curved blade like a mantis sickle is extended. At the same time, it has auxiliary wings and jet holes like a real mantis on its back. It can maintain its own balance while having a strong instant burst speed. With its terrifying speed and sharp weapons, this mechanical race can cut off the flesh of several insects in a blink of an eye. Even the largest insect with many limbs can be split in half in an instant. In addition to this relatively light-looking silent mantis, another type of mechanical race can gain the upper hand in melee with these huge insects. There are more powerful machines in the mechanical race. For example, a large mechanical body about 4 or 5 meters high, with a mammoth-like appearance, for extremely sturdy lower limbs and 2 huge mechanical forelimbs waving in front. It can fight against the surging zerg tide like a tank. It can easily crush all the bugs in front of it. However, the larger number of mechanical races are still various mechanical bodies holding thermal weapons, such as Jing mantis or some other mechanical races. They are the real main force when clearing out the zerg outside. These long-range combat units can easily lock the cystworms hiding in the zerg swarm and accurately kill these zerg long-range combat units. Although the zerg has strong physical ability and can easily kill humans, the flesh can only be easily crushed in front of the steel of the mechanical race. As long as these materials that can threaten Bayun steel are dealt with, the mechanical race will definitely have an advantage. The battle gradually began to affect the hiding place of Chen Ming's robot. Chen Ming had to move the robot towards the city again, away from the troubled places. Soon Chen Ming found another collapsed building, and a lush tree grew in the building, which could be well hidden in it. It also allowed Chen Ming to observe the battlefield situation more accurately. The battle between the mechanical race and the Thorn Zerg was obvious to everyone, and the mechanical race's attack capability was completely different from that of the Zerg. But as Chen Ming got to a higher place and could see the situation on the battlefield more clearly, he found that the number of mechanical races and Zergs that fell at this time was close to 1:2. This was obviously abnormal. Chen Ming quickly devoted himself to observation. Then he found a special place. The muscles under the brown carapace of the Thorn Zerg were gray-green, and gray-green blood would be sprayed out when injured. The blood pressure in the insects seemed to be very high, and these gray-green blood could be easily sprayed out for several meters. Once these gray-green blood covered the mechanical race, even if there is no external damage and no abnormalities such as leakage, the mechanical race will gradually lose their combat effectiveness and have abnormalities in the control of their own equipment and devices that should not appear at all. It is precisely because of this blood that the insects can barely pull the battle loss ratio back to 2:1. There is something wrong with this blood. When Chen Ming saw that the blood of the Zerg could affect the mechanic race, he subconsciously wondered if the Zerg had evolved the ability to restrain the mechanic race. But Chen Ming immediately thought that this idea was too exaggerated and denied it. Even if the Zerg on the space station teleported here from the moment Chen Ming left the space station, fought with the mechanic race, began to adapt to the mechanic race's ability, and evolved blood that restrained them, it took only half a year in total. Half a year. Evolved the ability to target a combat weapon left by a civilization. It shouldn't be the case. But in this case, the problem in this gray-green blood seems to be even bigger. Just as Chen Ming was thinking, the battle on the edge of the city continued. Although the blood of the Zerg has a considerable restraining effect on the mechanic race, The situation on the battlefield at this time is still one-sided in favor of the mechanic race. As a large number of cysts among the incoming Zerg fell, the Zerg charging in front lost their firepower support and were gradually suppressed by the mechanic race. Relying on the killing speed faster than the speed of the insects, they forced the Zerg back to the vicinity of the caves they dug. But even though these insects could not see any chance of winning, they continued to maintain their madness, struggling desperately with the seemingly endless number of insect swarms. But just when the Zerg were forced back to a certain distance outside the city by the firepower of the mechanical race, Chen Ming suddenly heard the roar of artillery from a position near the center of the city. Along with the roar of artillery, dozens of red streamers instantly rose into the sky. If Chen Ming remembered correctly, he had just seen a large warehouse near the tower. The icon of this warehouse on the map of the city he saw was a sharp weapon-like icon. This sudden red streamer was most likely a weapon there, or a special type of mechanical race. These streamers fell from the sky again within a few seconds after the launch. The fire accurately hit the Zerg swarm and the channel dug by the Zerg swarm, and dozens of miniature mushroom clouds burst out. All things related to insects were covered by the artillery fire. The flames and mushroom clouds had not yet dissipated. The hot and scorching breath had already spread outside the city. The remaining insects crawled out from under the completely charred bodies of their companions and rushed towards the mechanical race with their last bit of strength. Even if they died, they would at least spray their blood on the enemy. However, their end was doomed to failure. The insect swarm had no room to struggle under this pure firepower coverage, and the number of surviving insects was only less than half of the initial number. They were no longer a force to be reckoned with, and could not threaten the city of the mechanical race. As the last insect fell under the gun of the mechanical race, the battle that lasted for nearly an hour finally ended. And at the moment the battle ended, many of the mechanical races that were still active just now fell down in an instant and entered hibernation again like before. But at the same time, the electrical signals of many fallen mechanical races were completely cut off, and they fell into death completely. The death of some mechanical bodies did not cause any impact. Soon many mechanical races came out of the city and came here to clean up and sweep the battlefield. However, when it comes to cleaning, these mechanical races only put out the flames and collect the bodies of the dead mechanical races. The bodies of the insects lying outside were not taken care of by the mechanical races. Moreover, when it comes to recycling, many mechanical races who came to collect the bodies of mechanical races fell down halfway, and like these mechanical races to be recycled, they died completely. This scene made Chen Ming, who had been observing all this, feel an indescribable regret and sadness. It was a regret for the demise of civilization, and the sadness that the remnants of this civilization would soon die along with civilization. Of course, Chen Ming was not swayed by emotions. He just felt a little emotional when he saw this scene. He did not forget that the mechanical races are now almost all over the universe. At least they are not uncommon on the road of the Empire's development. Chen Ming now only wants to figure out one thing. How did these insects appear here? The only place that can figure this out and get clues is the city of the mechanical race. But Chen Ming has already controlled the tower, and he can be sure that there are no relevant records in the database inside the tower. However, such a large city is not the only one with a central database here. There are many independent small databases distributed in different places in the city. The data from different areas of the city will be concentrated in these small databases first, and through classification and analysis, the valuable data and information will be integrated into the database of the tower in the core area. The information of the Zerg will definitely not be worthless information. But there are still some places in the city that are out of the control of the tower. That's why he needed his robot to help observe the situation on the battlefield. Those places that are out of the control of the tower may have relevant records. It's not that Chen Ming can't repair and connect the area, but because a city is much more difficult to handle than a cruiser, his mental power is not enough. He doesn't know which area will store this part of information, and the efficiency of reconnecting those detached areas to the tower through psychic power is too low. It's better to determine the location of different small databases and let his robot go there in person. Chen Ming didn't waste time. While the mechanical race was still dealing with the battlefield, He let his robot take the core and start running to the area in the city that the tower couldn't affect. The whole city was divided into 36 areas on the map found by Chen Ming, 23 of which were still under control. There are 13 areas left, which should be enough to visit all of them today. The impact of the battle between the mechanical race and the Thorn Zerg was completely quelled after 3 hours. And Chen Ming finally found some clues in the 10th area after controlling the robot to search 9 areas. Since Chen Ming arranged the route of action according to the position of the robot, so he has not come to this area relatively close to the center of the city until now. Then he found that the database of the control center here is still running. Although the database here is also damaged, the undamaged part happens to save all the videos of the past 6 months. And it happened to be in the video of a night 5 months ago. Chen Ming saw a bright fire suddenly appeared in the dark sky at night, and something was entering the atmosphere. Although because of the darkness around and the fire caused by friction on the things entering the atmosphere, Chen Ming did not know its specific appearance and could not confirm what it was. But at the moment when this thing entered the atmosphere, Chen Ming saw that the entire mechanical city in the video became active, and they were preparing for battle. Although there was no actual battle until the thing landed. But after seeing the Zerg attack just now and the reaction of the mechanical race, Chen Ming has sufficient reason to believe that the Zerg entered the atmosphere of the planet from space. If he wanted to find out what the Zerg was all about, he had to investigate the landing point of the Zerg and the trajectory of the object when it entered the atmosphere. Everything would be easy with the video. Chen Ming first determined the flight trajectory after entering the atmosphere based on the video, and a simple calculation confirmed the trajectory of the object before entering the atmosphere. Then he used the highest point to perform a high-power scan to determine the positions and trajectories of all asteroids and other celestial bodies in the circumstellar orbit. Finally, based on the calculation, he pushed the trajectories of these asteroids back 5 months to the day when the video was recorded. In this way, in addition to the trajectory of the object that entered the atmosphere, Chen Ming could also accurately know the celestial environment in the circumstellar orbit at that time. At most, the newly added or disappeared celestial bodies in these 5 months could not be determined. But these were enough. Because on the day when the object landed, the trajectory behind it calculated by Chen Ming happened to overlap with several large asteroids gathered together. Even if Chen Ming might have some calculation errors, the results he calculated could not completely misalign with the positions of these asteroids. These bugs must have come from those asteroids. At this moment, Chen Ming suddenly doubted whether he was wrong. First of all, he could be sure that the Thorn Zerg was indeed a kind of bug that often appeared in asteroids. Does this mean that the Zerg here also grew from asteroids, just like the space station? And did these cystic worms really evolve by themselves? Several questions flashed through Chen Ming's mind quickly, but such things still had to be seen with one's own eyes. Chen Ming quickly confirmed the positions of the asteroids he suspected today and quickly locked them. He immediately let the highest point approach and planned to scan the asteroids. But when he went over, he found that it seemed unnecessary. Because there were very obvious gaps on those asteroids, one side was missing, revealing that the interior was completely hollow and full of various disgusting growths. This does not mean that Chen Ming's previous guess was correct. Instead, it made him more certain that the bugs must be from outside. Because Chen Ming asked the Supreme Point to do a simple scan, it can be determined that the gap on the asteroid was not broken from the inside out, but was smashed from the outside with extremely violent means. It was the bugs that invaded this asteroid that might be valuable to them and went to the planet below after a while. After confirming that there was no sign of life on the asteroid, Chen Ming sent a shuttle carrying several robots into the asteroid with a diameter of about 200 to 300 meters. However, after a search, the robot found nothing valuable and could only extract some growths and a little bit of green gelatinous residue and return to the spacecraft. Their names are Thorn Zerg Solidified Secretion and Thorn Zerg Glue, and it is not clear what they are used for. However, at this time, Chen Ming finally found a very detailed research report on the Thorn Zerg on different research websites. It was written by several biological masters whose names Chen Ming had heard of decades ago. This paper describes the specific situation of the entire Thorn Zerg in great detail, much more detailed than Chen Ming knew. The thorn zerg itself is not a rare creature, but very common, so common that it is somewhat rampant. It is because of human factors that it has become quite rare now. The reason for this situation is that when the Empire discovered the thorn zerg, a species that is everywhere, it happened to be the period when the Empire was expanding abroad. During this period, the Empire often encountered many creatures that were harmful to humans. In the face of the almost endless benefits brought by development and the benefits that were enough to make anyone and any force jealous to the point of outrage, any creature that blocked the pace of human development must die. Then the thorn zerg was basically extinct during the Empire's development period. Later, someone discovered that something seemed wrong, so they deliberately left some thorn zerg for research. There should still be individuals being cultivated in the Empire. There must be some outside, maybe squatting in some asteroid. The spread and harm of the thorn zerg are still very obvious, and now there is an additional rare feature. It was only before that it was used by the military in the star region to build a space station. However, judging from this paper, these bugs are not a big deal. Probably. After reading this paper, Chen Ming always felt that something was wrong. Because according to the records in the paper, these bugs did show a certain ability to evolve in the past. However, they soon almost died out under the Empire's deliberate extermination of such dangerous creatures that affected development, and they could not evolve at all. But the basic unit of this fast time in the paper is year, because the pioneering era lasted for hundreds of years, and the Empire has been affected by bugs all the time. And the bugs that Chen Ming encountered only took 2 days to evolve from the most primitive ordinary bugs, that is, those broadstrider bugs, to the ability to spit acid. After another 2 or 3 months, they disappeared from the space station and appeared here. It doesn't look like they have weak evolutionary ability. In the past, it may be because all the internal conflicts of the entire Empire were dispersed by the benefits brought by the pioneering, and the Empire worked together to deal with the troubles on the road of pioneering, resulting in the fact that the evolutionary ability of the bugs could not be exerted no matter how strong it was. But the time is different now. Chen Ming is really worried about the problems hidden behind these bugs. And his problem has not been solved yet. How did these bugs get here? Why did they raid the city like crazy because of him or because of the mechanical race? It can't be said that they have the same hive mind as the mechanical race, and if one of them evolves, the others can also evolve, causing the bugs here to evolve into cystic bugs like those on the space station? No, it's impossible. Chen Ming denied his thoughts again. Unless they have psychic energy, this is absolutely impossible. How can a hive mind survive hundreds of light years apart? If there is such a perverted ability, the Zerg could not be easily killed to the point of extinction by humans in the pioneering era. Could it be that the Zerg on the space station really evolved the ability to fly in space, or even fly in hyperspace channels and flew here? Chen Ming still couldn't be 100% sure. He still lacked evidence. But there is one thing he can be sure of. These bugs may be a big threat. He has to find a way to take away some of the corpses of the bugs and send them to the Empire, either to the boss or to Baiquan. What he said should be enough for them to pay more attention. In order to avoid the situation of the previous insect plague, the Empire is not so united now. Chen Ming sent out several landing craft again, landed near the mechanical city, and found an opportunity to take away the corpses without any obstruction. There are 4 kinds of bugs here. Chen Ming had seen the Thorn Zerg E Broadstrider and Thorn Zerg A Blister before, the largest Thorn Zerg A Giant Spider, and the Thorn Zerg A Shellworm with a beetle appearance. In fact, there is another kind of insect that Chen Ming has seen before, but there is no corpse here, Thorn Zerg A Larva. It is impossible for the Zerg to not have larvae, which is why Chen Ming is worried. The Thorn Zerg is likely to still be breeding deep underground on this planet. After sending all the corpses of these insects to the Defender and freezing them, Chen Ming was a little bit naive and let his robot try to contact the mechanical race. In the battle just now, Chen Ming saw a lot of mechanical races that obviously had good individual combat capabilities. And there were also mechanical races that could fire that special artillery in the back, which obviously had a considerable advantage in ground combat. It would definitely be worthwhile to find a way to take one away and compare it with the blueprint in his hand for research. Chen Ming's robot's behavior of secretly carrying the dead mechanical race was not discovered by other mechanical races. He did successfully obtain the corpses of several mechanical races. In addition to Chen Ming's existing standard mechanical race, Quiet Mantis, and small mechanical race, U-Worker B, there are also the standard mechanical body of Flying Mantis, as a melee unit with high-speed combat capability, and the small mechanical body U-Digging Worm, a large frontal combat unit. Although Chen Ming didn't know why this several-meter-tall big guy was a small mechanical body, it didn't matter. The name didn't affect its ability. In addition, Chen Ming was very envious of the mechanical medium mechanical body, Fiery Silkworm, that could fire artillery. Several of them were completely dead in the area where they usually stationed. After being controlled by Chen Ming, they were successfully taken away from the city. Then, Chen Ming couldn't help but reach out to the living dormant mechanical bodies. Then he was surprised to find that these dormant mechanical bodies seemed not to be affected by external things, even if his robot had touched the shell of the mechanical family. These dormant mechanical families seemed to be triggered only by fighting. Of course, Chen Ming still didn't let his robot be exposed directly on the streets of the city or in front of those mechanical families that were still active. He just wanted to take away a few living mechanicals and make sure that the one he controlled before was an exception. Chen Ming took away several dormant mechanicals as easily as he took away the bodies of other mechanicals and transported them directly to the highest point. There are many devices inside the highest point that can interfere with the normal operation of the machinery, and Chen Ming does not need to worry about the mechanical bodies suddenly erupting. When the mechanicals were transported to the highest point, the robot that Chen Ming sent to confirm the landing position of the bugs in the video was still on the way. So he simply came directly to the warehouse and came to these dormant mechanicals. In order not to damage these dormant mechanical bodies, Chen Ming chose to directly control these mechanical bodies and keep an eye on their panels. Just like the damaged mechanical body before, the consciousness column on their panels also changed from individual consciousness, subindividual, dormant, to individual consciousness, subindividual, abnormal. This is a good thing and a bad thing for Chen Ming. The good thing is that he doesn't need to worry about the mechanical race he controls being affected by the queen bee of the mechanical race in the future. The bad thing is that after losing the consciousness assistance of the group, the mechanical bodies he controls have become a little stupid in behavior. Wait, Chen Ming suddenly felt that something was wrong. As the number of abnormal subindividuals of the mechanical race he controls increased, these abnormal subindividuals seemed to have built a hive cluster of thinking networks. They were sharing their computing power with each other. And then Chen Ming also discovered another special place. That is, when he controlled these mechanical races as abnormal subindividuals, his mental power did not seem to be consumed. Chen Ming's psychic power can control many things, but he must continuously consume his mental power to control everything, anything, and any one thing. Even if it was the spaceship that Yuhui helped control, he had to at least spend a little mental power to control the spaceship. Although the continuous consumption is very small, this consumption is necessary. However, the machines he was controlling now changed from normal consciousness to abnormal machines. Except for the little mental power consumed in controlling them at the beginning, there was no subsequent continuous mental power consumption. But Chen Ming could still give them orders normally. This seemed a little wrong. Chen Ming temporarily put aside his attention to other things and focused his mental power on himself and the machines, observing them carefully. Chen Ming had just focused his consciousness. The next moment, his eyes suddenly widened, because these machines not only did not consume Chen Ming's mental power. In fact, they were feeding him back. After these mechanical races were transformed into abnormal subindividuals, their weak and abnormal individual consciousness fed back to Chen Ming's consumption of mental power to control them. Is this the influence of hive mind? Chen Ming understood. After he controlled these mechanical races, they became abnormal subindividuals. These mechanical races took him as the core consciousness and built a new cluster of hive consciousness. He was the queen bee. Chen Ming immediately began to check his own consciousness. There was no change except that his mental power had been fed back by these abnormal subindividuals. But Chen Ming still had some doubts about whether these mechanical races would affect his consciousness in turn. But he immediately realized that he didn't need to worry about this. His psychic instinct would help him eliminate all dangers. If there was really a problem, he would definitely know it in advance and directly disconnect from the mechanical race, or directly kill the consciousness of those weak abnormal sub-individuals. But if there was no problem, Chen Ming swallowed his saliva subconsciously. The effect that the consciousness of the mechanical race could feed back his mental power was self-evident. Chen Ming had a full view of the entire decaying city through the tower's surveillance, and once again couldn't help swallowing his saliva. He wanted this city. The thorn zerg on this planet must be cleared, just as Chen Ming had a clear idea in his mind. The robot he had arranged to go to the landing point where the object entered the planet's atmosphere from space in the video finally arrived at the destination. However, 5 months had passed since the day the video was recorded. The landing point was completely covered by these huge plants unique to the planet, except that the plants here were a little sparser and grew worse than the surrounding ones, which could indicate that the plants here had been destroyed and were regrowing. No traces were left. But fortunately, Chen Ming had thought of this possibility before and prepared some things in advance. He immediately modified a set of geological exploration equipment for the robot near the landing point. Let the robot start collecting soil near the landing point and underground at the center of the landing point. Soon the results of the geological exploration came out. Chen Ming did not find any traces of asteroids or meteorites. No stone or metal elements unique to space were brought to the planet. Instead, he found some broken gray-green growths in the underground soil. It can be seen without research that these proliferations must have been left by the Zerg. Only traces of bugs were found, but no traces of meteorites that would normally bring bugs into the atmosphere were found. What this means makes Chen Ming's emotions, which have been unable to calm down, fluctuate again. Perhaps these bugs, he does not need to eliminate them. In addition to the traces found here, Chen Ming also realized a problem. First of all, he can look at the vegetation at the landing point, the density difference between the underground soil layer at the landing point and the soil layer next to it, and the size of the red shiny area where the thing rubbed against the atmosphere in the video. It is estimated that this is a thing belonging to the Zerg with the size of a destroyer, wrapped in bugs that almost completely filled it up and landed here. And the bugs that raided the mechanical city before were obviously more than a destroyer that was 100 meters long. This means that the Thorn Zerg has indeed begun to breed on the planet as he thought before. The bugs that raided the city were definitely only a part of the Thorn Zerg on the planet. More Zergs must be breeding in some dark underground cave. Chen Ming could try to track the location of the Zerg nest through the tunnels that the Zerg had just dug. Although the tunnels were completely collapsed by the artillery bombardment of the cluster of mechanical heavy machinery, fiery silkworm, located in the center of the city. However, he had just controlled several mechanical small machinery, digging worms to do this. But Chen Ming had a better choice. Letting the high point enter the atmosphere of the planet and perform full power scanning without being affected by the atmosphere is much more efficient than letting the digging worms dig back along the path dug by the Zerg. After confirming the location and specific situation of the bugs, he could decide how to deal with these bugs in the future. But this matter cannot be rushed. He still has to do other things first. Chen Ming forced himself not to think about the bugs anymore. Anyway, the bugs were on the planet now. Under the surveillance of the Supreme Point, they would never escape. He still let his robot take the bug corpse samples and the mechanical race under his control to the landing craft, return to space, and return to the Defender. In order to prevent some possible unexpected situations, Chen Ming would rather spend more time to throw the bug corpses on the Defender for freezing and preservation. He would find an opportunity to send them back to China. After doing this, Chen Ming's mind unconsciously began to think about the bugs again. After all, if his guess is correct, then the Zerg may also bring him some special benefits. And these thoughts made him a little itchy, just wanting to finish the bugs as soon as possible to make sure whether his idea can be realized. Although Chen Ming should deal with the mechanical race and the Zerg race together now. But he couldn't help but focus all his attention on the Zerg race. The Supreme Point soon entered the planet's atmosphere with glory under his control, leaving the Defender in the planet's orbit. Chen Ming deliberately kept a distance from the mechanical city, came to the landing point of the Zerg, turned on the galaxy scanning array at full power, and locked the scanning target on the surface below. The high-power scan that can cover the entire galaxy penetrates from the surface of this planet into the mantle. A detailed scan is carried out in this area. The mechanical people in the mechanical city in the distance seem to be unable to see the highest point floating in the air in the distance, and they were still doing those futile work. A few minutes later, the scanning equipment at the highest point followed the structural features in the underground soil and rock layers that were obviously different from other places, and penetrated into the underground for several kilometers. And here, Chen Ming finally locked his target. A huge Zerg nest deep underground, with an area almost the same as the city on the surface. In the center of this nest, there is a giant Zerg organism with a body length of more than 100 meters. It is still alive, and has a slightly narrow and symmetrical appearance. And inside it is connected to the core of the Zerg nest, the queen. Although Chen Ming feels a little bit different, its overall appearance is somewhat similar after a few more glances. This giant organism seems to be what he is looking for. And what surprised Chen Ming even more was that there are some growths on this giant Zerg organism that wrap a special tissue of the Zerg, like a thick and long tentacle, extending all the way from deep underground to the surface. Chen Ming looked up along this tentacle. Finally, it was discovered that this extended tentacle forked into thousands of thinner tentacles near the surface. Then, it was connected to the bottom of almost every solar panel of the solar panel array that powered the mechanical city. Chen Ming looked at this scene and thought for a long time. Suddenly understood something. That is, the Zerg have the ability to convert electricity into bioenergy. No wonder when he asked Bai Quan for the records, he found that when the original Star Zone military team boarded the space station, the entire space station was already empty, and even the warehouse was emptied. Now it seems that this is the reason. The Zerg have the ability to convert electrical energy, so it is normal to empty the fuel warehouse. And he suddenly understood. Why did he find that there was a gap in the power supply of the entire city when he controlled the tower before? He thought it was because the power equipment was damaged. Now it seems that there is such a group of things living in the power supply core of the city. It would be strange if there is no shortage of electricity. To be honest, since the bugs that once settled in the warm place of the power generation area of the space station have evolved the ability to convert electrical energy into bioenergy, then Chen Ming is not surprised to evolve engines. But now, although Chen Ming has investigated the specific location of the Zerg nest, but this depth, don't even think about digging down. The solar panels above alone would cause him to have conflicts with the mechanical races that he had not yet controlled. He could certainly defeat them in a fight, but Chen Ming did not want to waste these mechanical races in such a place. He also wanted to control these mechanical races and make them his abnormal sub-individuals. Not to mention the spiritual power of feeding back. The strength of the mechanical races themselves alone was worth Chen Ming's doing. But if he continued to wait until he had controlled all the mechanical races in the entire city, the insects below could continue to reproduce for several rounds, and the insect nest might continue to expand. With the reproduction speed of the insect race, Chen Ming thought it was better not to delay. It would be better to deal with the insects quickly or get rid of them. That is, the specific treatment method. Chen Ming thought about it for a while. Suddenly, he seemed to have a way to make these insects, even the most core queen insects, come out from underground on their own initiative. Condensing the source of psychic energy. Living things have the habit of instinctively pursuing psychic fluctuations, that is, the habit of instinctively becoming psychic creatures. This is a piece of knowledge that Chen Ming learned from Xiaoshi. Ever since he had this source of condensed spiritual energy, Xiaoshi jumped on his bed every day. He didn't want to live in the stone nest that he had just bought for him, which was similar to the ore that exploded with the iron ore, but wanted to rub against the psychic energy fluctuations of the source of condensed spiritual energy. Although Xiaoshi was very small, rubbing against it would not affect him at all. But Chen Ming was worried that he would accidentally crush Xiaoshi when he was sleeping, so he didn't want Xiaoshi to lie on the bed with him. Until later, he saw Xiaoshi running around in the highest point, jumping down from a height of more than 20 meters, bouncing on the ground twice very elastically, and then continuing to stroll around without any problem. He remembered that Xiaoshi was no longer an ordinary Xiaoshi, so he let it do whatever it wanted. Just like now, Chen Ming put the source of condensed spiritual energy in his pocket. Xiaoshi stayed in his pocket, holding the source of condensed spiritual energy tightly. Of course, Xiaoshi is still very smart and will not eat something that he shouldn't eat. But Chen Ming can see that the attraction of this thing to creatures is really quite significant. And Chen Ming still remembers that the president said before that there are several ways to use the condensed psychic source. One of them is what Chen Ming is currently using as an auxiliary product for training mental power. Another is to condense the original spiritual stone. The last one is to feed some creatures, which can almost 100% make them become psychic creatures with some connection with psychics. So if the Thorn Zerg underground senses the existence of psychic fluctuations and condensed psychic source, they will definitely rush out frantically to try to obtain it. Chen Ming thought that he had better not use this special condensed spiritual energy source on hand. After all, he still had to rely on this thing to enter the consciousness space. Even if he did not feed the condensed spiritual energy source to the Zerg and connect to the Zerg with his mental power. Instead, he only thought of using this thing as bait. He had better be safe. Try to use his own mental power to condense a second condensed spiritual energy source, and then act as bait. But the materials needed for this thing, Chen Ming couldn't say, and it was not easy to get it. It was really outrageous that the materials needed for the condensed spiritual energy source were random materials. How many kinds of materials are there in this universe? The possibility of picking a few at random and getting it right is completely the same as zero. But maybe he can change his mind? Chen Ming took out his own colorless amber condensed spiritual energy source that was condensed after the death of the deformed heart, and after being affected by the ship's spirit and purified, it became his condensed spiritual energy source. His condensed spiritual energy source has a colorless amber appearance. It just so happens that Chen Ming knows several materials with such colorless amber appearance. Then maybe the material he needs to condense the condensed spiritual energy source is such a colorless amber? Although Chen Ming himself thinks this idea is a bit unreliable. But it won't hurt to try. Chen Ming immediately called Lao Wu back and asked him to help buy these materials and prepare them for the experiment. Of course, Chen Ming clearly remembered what the president said before, the problems that may be caused by condensing the second condensed spiritual energy source. So in the subsequent attempts, once his mental power has a negative impact, he will stop directly. In case of accidents. But if it doesn't appear, the second condensed spiritual energy source is definitely a good thing. The general plan has been determined. So now, Chen Ming needs to use the spiritual energy fluctuations of this special condensed spiritual energy source on his hand to release some basic psychic fluctuations on the surface of the planet. The illusory bait. Attract the attention of the Zerg to the surface. In this way, the next time he really releases the condensed psychic energy source, he can be discovered by the Zerg in the first place. The method of releasing the bait is also very simple. He only needs to let the flying mechanical body take the condensed psychic energy source out for 2 rounds. The dissipated psychic fluctuations will stay in the outside world for a while and then dissipate. This period of time is enough for the Zerg who can detect his spaceship in the vacuum to detect these psychic fluctuations. Chen Ming quickly completed the operation of leaving psychic fluctuations near the surface facing the Zerg nest according to his idea. Next, he only needs to wait for the materials to be in place and try to condense the second condensed psychic energy source. Success is the best. If it fails, then he can only take a certain risk to try with a special condensed psychic energy source. Although there are risks, the benefits are obvious. Chen Ming can slowly control the remaining mechanical race in his hands safely. There may even be some additional, special gains. And as long as he has prepared anti-risk measures in advance, risks are no longer risks. The risks that the Zerg, which Chen Ming had scanned from beginning to end, could bring to him were clearly certain. So as long as he was well prepared, even if he failed, it would only be a waste of some of the resources needed to deal with the risks. The only thing to note now was that Chen Ming must not directly alert the enemy. If the cruiser he was driving scared the Zerg away, he would definitely lose a lot of money. So after arranging everything needed on the planet, Chen Ming took the two cruisers and left the planet. Back to orbit. It was almost time to rest at this point. Chen Ming ruled out the possibility of robots sneaking into the city from the beginning, letting the robots run around in the city, confirming various intelligence, and then letting the highest point enter the atmosphere to conduct investigations. This process took a lot of time. It was almost night, and it was better to wait until tomorrow to deal with the rest of the things. Anyway, the materials could not be delivered so quickly. But before the final rest, Chen Ming put his consciousness on the Defender. In the Defender's warehouse was a damaged satellite that he had taken from orbit before. When he found that the tower had been continuously trying to send messages to the satellite, he had a special idea. Chen Ming activated his psychic power and repaired the satellite. Then, he used the tower, which was still under his control, to send the signal that the tower had been sending to the Defender. The repaired satellite in the Defender's warehouse received this signal. After a short pause, it sent a new signal to a specific coordinate in the more distant starry sky. Of course, the signal sent by the satellite was intercepted by Chen Ming, but the coordinates of the destination where he sent the signal were recorded by Chen Ming. And this coordinate happened to be in the direction that Chen Ming would open up in order to build a colony. It would be reached after about 13 extreme distance jumps. There is a high possibility that there are high-value things in the place where the signal is received, which is connected to such a mechanical city with a high probability of being a border flag. In other words, that place itself will have very high value. If there is a chance later, he must go and see it. Chen Ming turned off the signal transmitters of the satellite and the tower. At this time, he also felt a little tired and lay down on the bed after a simple wash. To be honest, he really didn't expect that he came to this planet where the mechanical race existed this time, just because he was bored and came to see it, but he didn't expect that he would actually gain a lot in the end. The existence of the mechanical race alone and the construction of the hive thinking network with him as the core are outrageous enough. Now the location of that coordinate has been obtained. It may even be possible to get some possible benefits from the bugs later. Thinking of this, Chen Ming closed his eyes with great satisfaction. However, before really resting, Chen Ming and Hui Huang explained the matter of HR and asked it to help with ideological work. In the end, he also chose to consume 100% of his mental power and add an alpha core bonus called Elite Individual to HR. After selecting and confirming, Chen Ming felt the rapid consumption of mental power that he had not experienced for a long time, and quickly reached the limit of his mental power. This time Chen Ming did not hold on and fell into a coma. The next day came in a blink of an eye. Chen Ming climbed out of bed in high spirits. The first thing he did was to confirm the situation at the temporary base. The prototype of the temporary base has basically been established at this time, and the construction of the starport has been carried out step by step. Some spaceships with combat capabilities have left the base and started exploring the surrounding galaxies. After the construction of the starport is completed, nearly half of Chen Ming's spaceships can go out to explore and find valuable galaxies. If it is just to explore the galaxies with the possibility of habitable planets, then Chen Ming estimates that his Yuhui can be mobilized to thoroughly explore the surrounding 400 light-years within a week. Of course, if a more detailed and wider investigation is to be carried out, it will take longer. Anyway, Chen Ming has nothing else now but a lot of time, so he will take his time. He is not in a hurry. There is no use in being anxious, because he still needs to spend a lot of effort to control the mechanical race on the planet. When Chen Ming confirmed the situation at the base, Hui Huang gave Chen Ming good news. It talked to HR. Let HR understand what Chen Ming's psychic power means to Yuhui. In addition, the addition of the core bonus of Elite Individual that Chen Ming gave to HR last night can be regarded as an assist for Hui Huang. So when Hui Huang came to find Chen Ming today, it said to Chen Ming, HR said he will help you protect this place, but he doesn't want to do anything else for the time being. Please understand that he still needs time to consider. Chen Ming felt that Hui Huang's words were exaggerated by him, but the overall meaning should not have changed. All the Yuhui controlled by Chen Ming knew the situation they were in and knew that they had no way out. HR was obviously the same, and it was a rational choice for it to do so, giving it some time to think. But again, Chen Ming was not in a hurry. Anyway, in a short period of time, there would definitely not be a cruiser-level war in the galaxy close to the border of the Empire, so he didn't need to rush HR to force him to obey his orders. And HR also said that it would help protect this place, and it would never go back on its own promise. If it really came to a time of necessity, Chen Ming was not a person who didn't know how to adapt. In short, his relationship with HR had improved to a certain extent. Improvement is a good thing. After chatting with Hui Huang, Chen Ming opened HR's panel and took a look. Elite, Afterglow Alpha Class AI Core, HR. Manufacturer, Afterglow B01 Colony near Earth Orbit Industrial Facility. Alpha Class Core Bonus, Energy Concentration Effect. Self-awareness, existence. Computing power, Star District level. Executable operations, none. Except that the name turned gold and elite individual did not appear on the core bonus but appeared in front of the name. There were no major changes. However, when Chen Ming opened the panel for the additional core bonus, he saw that the number of additional core bonuses that could be added was 2. He closed the panel with great satisfaction. Next, it's time to continue dealing with yesterday's affairs. Yesterday, Chen Ming asked Lao Wu to buy 5 transparent amber materials that look similar to his condensed spiritual energy source. 3 of the easier ones are now in place and have been sent to the number 6 space arm of the space station by Lao Wu. Chen Ming can bring them directly to his side by using the transformation of spiritual energy. Because condensing the condensed spiritual energy source is the same as Chen Ming adding an extra core bonus to Alpha Afterglow, it requires 100% of mental power. And Chen Ming's consciousness must remain clear and not fall into a coma. So he came to the kitchen as before and held the knife in his hand first. When Chen Ming left the space station before, the boss specially gave him a few medical robots. One of them is placed here in the kitchen. No need to worry about whether he can get timely medical treatment after being injured. Before, Chen Ming was a little nervous and felt that the boss had some misunderstandings about him. Now, it seems that the boss's idea is not a problem. At this time, he was on a video call with the president, and just as he sent the video of the highest point that he had taken away after talking to Chen Ming, his boss sneezed. The president stopped the topic he was talking about with his boss and asked, "Are you catching a cold?" The boss nodded slightly and said, "It's possible. Lying down every day has made your physical fitness worse. But it's okay. Let's continue talking about Xiao Ming. I am very optimistic about him. Look at the action of stabbing himself with a knife. Doesn't it look like the little madman I was optimistic about before? Isn't that little madman dead?" That's right." Chen Ming held the knife in one hand and handed the 3 materials with transparent amber appearance to him with the other hand. According to the process recorded in the document given by the president before, he began to guide the mental power outside the body and gradually gathered it on the materials to be condensed. The process of actively excluding mental power from the body felt to Chen Ming like the normal use of psychic power, but it did not have any practical effect. There was nothing special about the rest. Time passed by minute by minute. Chen Ming had guided most of his total mental power outside the body. A group of twisted air balls that looked like flames burning the air had appeared in his hand. This was a product of highly compressed mental power that was close to the substance. But at this time, he still did not feel any resonance between him and the 3 materials in his hand. Chen Ming probably had a bad premonition in his heart, but he continued and guided all his mental power to his hands. He only relied on the little mental power restored by the honeycomb network of the abnormal individual to observe the materials in his hand and the highly condensed mental power ball. And the result? The 3 materials did not react at all. They were not the materials Chen Ming needed to condense the spiritual energy source. So he had to give up and try to absorb the spiritual power again. It was just as the document given by the president said. The difficulty of absorbing these spiritual powers that had been guided out of the body and exposed to the external environment was much greater than the difficulty of guiding the new spiritual power in the body. At least his spiritual power was almost exhausted, and he had no way to maintain this group of spiritual power and absorb all the spiritual power back stably. In the end, he only absorbed about 30% of the spiritual power. This first attempt was considered a failure, but Chen Ming had such a feeling in advance, so it was not too surprising. If it was so easy to get it done, then the condensed spiritual energy source would not be so rare. Then he could only wait for the subsequent materials to be delivered and try whether the remaining two materials had any effect. If the next two materials had no effect, he could only use the special condensed spiritual energy source as bait according to his previous idea. There wasn't much Chen Ming could do for the rest of the day. He simply sent a mechanical body with a propeller on its back, called Tornado by Chen Ming, to fly over the hive again with the condensed spiritual energy source, intending to leave more traces of spiritual energy fluctuations. When the tornado passed by this time, Chen Ming didn't even need to use the scanning array at the highest point to see with his naked eyes that some insects were searching for traces of spiritual energy fluctuations he left yesterday on the ground. The bait worked. So this time Chen Ming didn't let Tornado pass by again, but circled a few times at a distance and returned to the landing craft and the highest point. In case Tornado, a mechanical body that was obviously wrong, was discovered by the Zerg, causing the Zerg to be unnecessary vigilant. After completing this task, Chen Ming also sent several robots with several gamma cores he currently had and took more than a dozen ordinary robots to the city of the mechanical race. Let these robots contact the mechanical races whose lines were damaged in the city. Control them. Help Chen Ming save energy and time. By the way, when he can't find a suitable target, he can also help him move out other intact mechanical races in the city. Move them back to the landing craft and transport them back to the highest point, so that he can control them uniformly. After all, the appearance of these mechanical races is intact. If Chen Ming doesn't want to damage their external armor and doesn't want to have a direct conflict with the mechanical race, then he can only do this. And he had already tried it yesterday. There is no problem for the robots he controls to contact those dormant mechanical races. All dormant mechanical races will not have any reaction when touched, as long as there is time and enough robots that can work. Chen Ming will be able to empty the entire city sooner or later. Anyway, there are many gamma cores that have nothing to do and are dormant in the temporary base. As long as he wants, he can transport a batch of them at any time. Of course, for safety reasons, these robots that will move dormant mechanical races later will only be responsible for sneaking into some areas where Chen Ming can be sure that there are no active mechanical races to work. Those areas where there are active mechanical races will be handed over to the mechanical races that he has controlled. The mechanical races in this city can't tell which are their own people and which are abnormal individuals controlled by Chen Ming. Even if his mechanical race is exposed to other mechanical races, it will not cause any problems. It can only be said that this abandoned city no longer has a normal environment. These mechanical tribes have also seemed to have lost their basic behavioral logic, with only an instinctive consciousness of counterattacking when attacked. As long as Chen Ming asks Hui Huang to help arrange the work for each robot and intervene when necessary, there is no need to worry at all. It is better to worry about the process of controlling so many mechanical tribes. Although he does not consume much mental power when controlling each mechanical tribe, and as the number of abnormal subindividuals controlled by him increases, his mental power will also receive additional feedback from the hive mind network, so there is no need to worry about consumption. However, the number of mechanical tribes in this city is more than 100,000. Even if there are many mechanical tribes that have been completely damaged or partially damaged, the number of mechanical tribes that look intact will definitely not be less than 50,000. In fact, it can be seen from yesterday that there are still many mechanical tribes in the whole city that have not come, but relying on the mechanical tribes in several areas near the edge, the group of insects that came to attack can be easily destroyed. The number of mechanical tribes is definitely more than Chen Ming thought. It can only be said that the mechanical race is not like Yu Hui, where each individual has very powerful computing power. Their hive mind determines that they rely on the collective, and they are in the collective and perform their own duties. Therefore, the density of the number of mechanical race individuals is definitely greater than that of Yu Hui. And this huge number means that it takes a lot of time to control them. Chen Ming's Yu Hui can only use the data line to help him control those mechanical races that are partially damaged and the lines are exposed. He must do the rest himself. Control them one by one. Even if there are 100,000 pigs, it will take at least a month. No, pigs seem to be more difficult to deal with than these dormant mechanical races. His psychic power can control the mechanical race as long as he touches it, but he really can't control pigs. Chen Ming shook his head and threw away the strange thoughts in his mind. In fact, he doesn't need to be too negative about the efficiency of this matter. As long as he can control all the individuals in the city that can be used for combat, then the remaining non-combat type mechanical races will be at his mercy, right? Moreover, although the city's tower has lost the ability to control the mechanical race, it still has the ability to control the city itself. With the assistance of the tower, the core of the city, the overall efficiency is definitely not that bad. Another day passed in a flash. Chen Ming once again sent a group of robots with gamma-level afterglow cores to the city of the mechanical race to speed up the work efficiency. At the same time, he also sent Tornado to the vicinity of the insect nest again and found that the insect race had indeed completely discovered the traces left by Chen Ming's condensed spiritual energy source. Many insects have appeared on the surface and scattered in a large area for search. It seems that as long as the spiritual energy fluctuations of the condensed spiritual energy source appear again, they will swarm up. And today, Lao Wu also sent the remaining 2 materials with pure white transparent amber appearance to Space Arm number 6. One of them is called white fat, which is a natural resin material produced by plants that is difficult to cultivate artificially. The other is called white amber steel, which is a byproduct of smelting special-grade metal or with a special appearance. And this time, when Chen Ming concentrated all his mental power outside his body and wrapped the 2 materials, he found that his mental power still did not resonate with these materials. It seemed that he failed again. Sure enough, the material for condensing the spiritual energy source was not so easy to deal with. Just when Chen Ming was about to give up, the boat spirit that had been squatting at the highest point suddenly jumped out of the wall and drilled into the interior of the white amber steel wrapped by mental power. Then, the white amber steel that was half the size of Chen Ming's palm showed visible changes in details. Under the influence of the boat spirit, the whole piece of white amber steel became closer to the appearance of Chen Ming's condensed spiritual energy source. The slight deviation between it and the condensed spiritual energy source was corrected. And the boat spirit also took the initiative to help Chen Ming guide the spiritual power restricted in his hand into the white amber steel. It can almost be said that it completed the condensation process of condensing the spiritual energy source for Chen Ming, which originally required him to complete it with extreme mental exhaustion. Chen Ming still maintained a clear consciousness. Chen Ming watched the whole process in detail and had a rough guess about the situation in his mind. However, he was not 100% sure, so he asked the boat spirit, "How did you do it?" The boat spirit understood Chen Ming's words and circled around the amber steel that had become Chen Ming's second condensed spiritual energy source. Then he straightened his body made of phantom towards Chen Ming, exuding a little pride. "Well?" Chen Ming translated the meaning of the boat spirit in his mind, then pointed at Baiji next to him and asked, "Is this okay?" The boat spirit immediately shook his body, exuding a negative emotion. Then Chen Ming understood. The properties of the white amber steel itself are actually somewhat similar to the material he used to condense the origin of his spiritual energy. So the boat spirit can help him change the properties of the white amber steel and complete the rest of the operation. This ability to change the physical properties of an object. It should be a derivative of his transformation ability. This is the manifestation of the boat spirit's spiritual properties of a psychic. Although this method makes Chen Ming a little uncomfortable, after all, he can't transform the physical properties of an object at all, at least not now. But the boat spirit did it. Of course, this is not a bad thing. At least it lets Chen Ming know the possibility and direction of his subsequent development of spiritual energy. It also lets Chen Ming know that the upper limit of transformation is not limited to what he currently knows. Chen Ming reached out and touched the place on the boat spirit's phantom that was probably the head, and he was unconsciously happy. It was precisely because of the help of the boat spirit that he was able to complete the condensation of the psychic energy source when the materials were wrong. And he also knew the direction of the development of psychic abilities in the future. Everyone was happy. The boat spirit noticed Chen Ming's joy, and it seemed to be infected by Chen Ming's emotions. It returned to the highest point with the same joy and its own slightly proud emotions. The second piece of condensed psychic energy source was obtained, and the bait was ready, but Chen Ming could not do it directly. He still needed to wait for the recovery of his mental power. Then for the rest of the day, he continued to work on the mechanical city as yesterday. Another new day has arrived. Chen Ming's mental power has returned to the peak again. Then it is time to start setting up the trap to lure the Zerg out. The way to set it up is actually quite simple. Only one psychic creature is needed to definitely attract the attention of the Zerg. Of course, it is not Xiao Shi, but something else. This Chen Ming is ready. But before setting the trap, he had to leave a backup for the precious bait. Chen Ming knocked on the wall at the highest point, and the boat spirit poked its head out of the wall. Looking at the puzzled boat spirit in front of him, Chen Ming suddenly found that it seemed to be getting more and more solid during this period. Although the appearance is still a phantom and has not been finalized, the opacity of the phantom has been getting higher and higher, and it should become completely opaque in a short time. This should not be a bad thing for the boat spirit. Chen Ming took out his second piece of condensed spiritual energy source, knocked on it lightly and said, "Come, go in. Help me protect it. Don't let it be absorbed by other things." The boat spirit would naturally not refuse Chen Ming's request and got in obediently. With the protection of the boat spirit, Chen Ming would not need to worry too much about the situation of condensing the spiritual energy source later. The next step is to prepare the last step of the trap. Chen Ming needs to feed this thing to a certain flying creature. As for what specific creature to feed it to, when Chen Ming used the highest point to scan the planet before, he had scanned a variant of the empty jellyfish. It can only be said that the empty jellyfish is a relatively special creature, because it has the ability to travel in space, especially the elderly individuals. The empty jellyfish will gradually grow larger with age. The gas mass in their bodies will become lighter, and the body tissue will become thinner, but the strength of the body tissue will increase. They can actively eject violent airflows that can make them exceed the second or even third level of cosmic speed. These empty jellyfish will land on other planets and then die. After death, they will leave behind empty jellyfish eggs that reproduce the next batch of empty jellyfish, and then use their own gelatinous corpses to supply nutrition to the new empty jellyfish when they cannot float. So even planets that humans have never set foot on often have traces of their existence. Moreover, they are not very harmful. As long as they are not exposed to fire, there is almost no threat. In addition, they do not need to consume too much material to survive, and the material that constitutes their body tissue is also very easy to degrade, which has almost no impact on the ecosystem. If the number of air jellyfish is large enough, it can promote ecological air purification. It can only be said that if they are not of the nature of exploding when encountering fire, Chen Ming should be able to see them in mini colonies or space stations. In addition, when Chen Ming was reading research reports on various websites before, he saw that some research institutes of biotechnology companies were trying to genetically modify air jellyfish. It makes it lose the ability to explode and maintain the ability to purify the air. It's just that the progress seems not ideal, and it has nothing to do with Chen Ming. As a student of spacecraft, he probably won't need to use biological technology in his life. In short, after having these basic understandings of the empty jellyfish and scanning the empty jellyfish group at the highest point, Chen Ming already had a complete idea in his mind. He wanted to let an old empty jellyfish eat the condensed spiritual energy source that hosted the ship spirit, let it emit the spiritual energy fluctuations that the swarm had felt several times in the past few days, and attract the Zerg to space. Of course, not all old empty jellyfish will choose to enter space, and some empty jellyfish will stay on the planet and wait for death to come. But Chen Ming's empty jellyfish was caught when it was about to enter space. So Chen Ming doesn't need to worry about the situation where the empty jellyfish is given away directly. Of course, the condensed spiritual energy source itself still needs to be protected by the ship spirit so that it can't be taken away by the bugs, and it can't be absorbed by too much spiritual energy fluctuations by the empty jellyfish. All preparations have been completed. Then Chen Ming no longer wastes time and starts his arrangements directly. It is not difficult to use the living habits of the empty jellyfish itself to pass over the area where the Zerg settles. Next, if the bugs want to capture the air jellyfish, they must send out something that can fly. Chen Ming wanted to see how the bugs fly. Chen Ming was sitting at his desk in his study, holding his psychic weapon in his hand, Ming. In the past 2 days, he took the time to compress the word of Madness Spirit Stone to a suitable size and embed it into the psychic weapon. Chen Ming could clearly feel that when he held the psychic weapon, his mental power and psychic strength would have additional increases. The original psychic weapon gave an increase of about 1.1 times, but after the Spirit Stone was embedded, the strength of mental power was about 1.3 times. The effect can be said to be quite obvious. However, for what he was going to do now, no preparation was too much. Chen Ming stared at the old air jellyfish intently through the scanning array at the highest point, watching it fly low over the Zerg's nest according to Chen Ming's arrangement, and then fly to the sky. The thorn Zerg took the bait almost instantly. Some of the bugs searching outside immediately flapped their elytra on their backs and chased the old jellyfish flying high in the sky. Chen Ming immediately planned to intervene slightly to prevent these bugs from catching the jellyfish before it rose to a high enough height. However, to Chen Ming's surprise, the old jellyfish suddenly ejected a violent airflow to the left and instantly accelerated to the sky. The speed was even faster than those Zergs that Chen Ming had never seen before, with huge elytra on their backs, slender bodies, and very light at first glance. Even without Chen Ming's coercion and help, it was doing what Chen Ming wanted to see it do: go to space. It was approaching the end of its age, and it needed to reproduce. The instinct of reproduction forced it to do this, and this was exactly why Chen Ming chose it. As the jellyfish rose in height, the surrounding atmosphere became thinner. Those Zerg individuals flying with elytra have gradually lost the ability to continue flying upwards. This conspicuous psychic wave is about to enter the outermost part of the atmosphere. This full banquet that is about to be served to the Zerg will soon be gone. At the moment when Chen Ming determined that the flying insects of the Zerg had completely lost the ability to catch up with the air jellyfish, the scanning array on the highest point that was still scanning the planet suddenly sent back a special signal. The ground was shaking. It was the insects underground that became active. And within the range covered by the tower monitoring, countless mechanical races suddenly woke up and prepared for battle. Fortunately, Chen Ming had thought that the actions of the Zerg might affect the mechanical races in the nearby cities, so he did not arrange his robots to enter the city today. So he was not affected and did not need to deal with things in a hurry. And deep underground at this time, in the insect nest displayed by the scanning array, the huge organism at the core of the insect nest that Chen Ming had seen before was undergoing a violent evolution, evolving towards something that Chen Ming was very familiar with. Watching the rapid changes taking place on this giant organism, Chen Ming's heartbeat began to accelerate, and his emotions gradually became excited. He subconsciously said to himself, "Yes, that's it." Originally, this giant organism that protected the queen inside was only symmetrical and narrow in appearance and looked like a spaceship. But now, as the changes in it became more prominent, Chen Ming can be 100% sure that this giant organism itself is a biomass spaceship. It was only in the underground that some of its abilities were temporarily degraded in order to build a nest. Combined with the clues that Chen Ming had learned before, he can be sure that the Thorn Zerg must rely on these biomass spaceships to fly in space. These biological spacecrafts definitely have the ability to accelerate to near the speed of light in space, and even enter hyperspace. Then the situation of the carrier of the Zerg space travel has been determined. It is a biomass spacecraft evolved by the Zerg themselves. At this time, Chen Ming, who was very excited, had only one question in his mind. In his psychic judgment, is such a biomass spacecraft considered a spacecraft that he can control? He is now extremely curious. Prev is identical to table of contents. Google next. About us, contact us DM.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.